this is brought to you today by Canyon Professional Development, which is our professional development arm that works out of Grand Canyon University. And we are so happy to be able to provide the services for our leaders. I really feel like you guys, I think you hear me say this often when I talk to all of you, I just don't feel like you get the love that you deserve as leaders of our schools. You're out there on the front lines, handling problems and doing it with grace and dignity, and really supporting your staff, your students, your parents in this really uncertain time. So, as we go through this webinar today, don't worry too much about copying a bunch of things down. We will make sure that all the links get put in the YouTube video that will be posted later. So now's my opportunity to let you know that we are going to be recording this webinar today. It'll be posted to our YouTube channel. So you can go back and access it later if you would like to revisit any of the information that Meredith shares with you today. Or even if you want to share it out with other principals who weren't able to join us today because of other commitments. So do know that we will be doing that. Oh, Scott Still Christian, I see, is right there. And if you look in the chat, there's some people working behind the scenes, my team, who's a phenomenal team, who will be popping the links into the chat as well. So you'll be able to grab them out of the chat as they go by. And go navigate to any of the sites or things that we talk about throughout the event. So again, I'm with Canyon Professional Development, part of K-12 Educational Development. We're so happy to have you on today. It's 12:05, so don't want to waste any time. I'll hand it over to Meredith. Meredith.
Thank you guys so much. So this is Connect to Assess, Web 2.0 tools to enhance remote learning. So we're going to kind of go over some of the basic principles of integrating Web 2.0 tools into our newly found remote learning situations. And then we're going to kind of emphasize the importance of connecting before we get to that assessment piece. And I'm going to give you guys two choice tools, my favorite tools that I think work regardless of the grade level that your teachers are working with, regardless of the ability or disability levels of the students that you're working with. These tools really have the capacity to a lot of students' needs in your school, and plus they're free. So with no further ado, I say we kind of hop in. My name is Dr. Meredith Critchfield. You guys can call me Meredith, of course. Welcome in. First off, let me thank you for doing all that you're doing. I know that that shift was massive for you guys, and it wasn't just massive. I would say it was almost sort of like a revolution that you guys have had to go through as a school and in your districts and in your organization. So thank you for all the sacrifices that you've made for your teachers, for your staff, for your learners, for students, parents over the last 5, 6, 7 weeks. I know it's been a difficult one. So for those of you I don't know, and I know a couple of you, I am a professor of education at Grand Canyon University, and that's my email address there. So if you ever have any questions, please don't be shy. Hey, I want to try this tech tool. What do you think, Critchfield? Do you like this? Have you used this? I've used a lot of different tech tools that are out there. And while I'm going to share my few favorites with you, please know that I have tried and tested and failed with many different tech tools. So I want you guys to know that I am all ears for you for this hour, but well past this hour as well. And I have been in the field of education for about 16, 17 years now. I used to be a public school teacher, and then I moved into teacher education, and I've been doing professional development specifically in Web 2.0 and tech tools for the last 10 or 12 years or so. I also co-host the Grand Canyon University College of Education podcast. If you're not familiar with that, it's called Top of the Class on iTunes and Spotify and all of that. So hopefully you'll check that out if you're into podcasts and you need some tunes to listen to while you're working in your office over the summer.
So and you guys, it is worth your time. Go and check it out. They have so many amazing guest speakers on there and great topics. So definitely check it out if you haven't already.
Thank you. Coming up, we have featuring two of the most recent Arizona State Teachers of the Year. So while I know y'all hail from all across the country, we do have a couple special guests coming up. Teachers of the Year, for instance. So with no further ado, I say we hop in. So I want to start with sort of the golden rule of online instruction and Web 2.0 tools. And for me, that golden rule is to connect first. And I think that this is probably something a lot of your students in your schools, and as well as their teachers and parents, struggled with at first, which is, okay, we're now shifting everything online. We got to keep instructing. We got to assess. We got to see, are they learning? What are they learning? Can we prove it, right? But what I would posit to you guys is actually that we need to make sure that we're connecting with our learners first, and making sure that your teachers have that as their #1 priority. So before we do any type of instruction or assessment when we are in an online space, we need to be connecting first. And if we connect first, then we know that we can assess later down the line once we're able to get in some good instruction. So connection really should be at the heart of everything we do. I also want to point out that connection is a little bit more challenging in the online space, but fortunately we have some incredible tech tools that can replicate that in-class experience online. So I look forward to sharing that with you guys, those tools. But it really isn't about the tools at all. And I know that seems a little silly to say, that it's not actually about the tools, but it isn't about the tools. The tools are simply there as channels, as conduits to help us meet our objectives. And so when you're thinking about your teachers, and when you're thinking about your students and their demographics and the community that you are in and you're serving and loving and supporting, what are the tools that are going to help those students the most? I'll give you guys an example. My students were heartbroken when our semester came to a close earlier than expected. They really value that face-to-face time. And so my initial thought was, okay, I must select a Web 2.0 tool then that is going to help my students feel like they're having that in-class discussion experience, which then immediately took me to a tool called Flipgrid, which I'll share more about later. But I just wanted to share that with you guys, that initially the first thing in your head shouldn't be what flashy tool can I use, but what is actually going to facilitate my connection and instruction and assessment the best, and then work backwards from there. And we have so many tech tools out there that, again, it's not about the tool, it's about the objective itself, what we need our students to know, and what kind of access they have to technology and what kind of community that they're in, and then figure out the tool from there. Okay, so focus on the objectives first, tools will come next. I'm sure many of you guys found this kind of rattled you perhaps a bit. I know it rattled a lot of teachers that I work with regularly, and that was that there was no home base for a lot of online instruction. So what I would suggest first and foremost is, when you're thinking about a tech tool, think about a tech tool that can hold and contain all the links, all the resources, all the instructional materials, and the assessments in one space. And that could be something free, you know, it could be like a Moodle, you could have an Edmodo, you could have a Sakai. There are a lot of different tools that are out there. A Google Classroom, many of you guys are familiar with that one. But it's important to have a home base. Think of it sort of like a wheel. You have to have that home base before you have the spokes off the wheel, right? Like before you're sending students in all these different directions, go to, you know, this place for this video, and then go to this place for this video. There has to be a contained place, a home base. So select that home base first. That will help build a sense of rapport and community and unity within your classrooms. And as something that I think a lot of your teachers are going to seek is that sense of unity. So I definitely recommend focusing on that home base. Also, what our research tells us is that learners in online environments, whether they are preschool or 12th grade or anything in between, need not only synchronous learning like they've experienced in school, but they also need asynchronous learning, meaning they need to be able to get on when they want to get on to complete the work. So what I would urge you to think about and impart to your teachers is that find a way to make sure that there are some expectations for synchronous communication and expectations for asynchronous communication. Here's an example of that. Many teacher friends of mine right now are holding a couple times a week, if not every single day, a synchronous Zoom meeting. Now, it doesn't need to be 8 hours long. It could be 30 minutes long, but some sort of synchronous meeting where everybody is collaborating, meeting together at the same time. And then beyond that, there needs to be some asynchronous time where they're able to log on. Maybe if they are a 7-year-old and their parent is only available at 7 p.m. right before bedtime, they need to be allowed and able to log in at that time to complete it. So if all you're doing in your schools and districts are synchronous, it's not enough. We need to also offer that asynchronous opportunity where they can log in as they see fit, okay? So in addition, what I would also say is, I know I'm a teacher. I get really excited about all the tech tools. I'm like, yes, I can Padlet, I can Kahoot, I can Pear Deck, I can Flipgrid, I can do all the things, right? Like Oprah, you get a tool, you get a tool, you get a tool, we all get a tech tool. But the downside of that is that it is not always age and developmentally appropriate to give students all of these different tools. And also there's a learning curve to the tools. And so expecting students to just sort of go in and be able to master all of these tools is I think, a myth that we have about this generation, that they all can sort of just seamlessly navigate whatever tech tool given. And while they might be excellent at TikTok and Snapchat, that does not mean that they will be A++ when it comes to Google Classroom. So here's what I would suggest. The first time students, and you have your teachers talk to students in that with a particular tech tool, it should be solely for fun, solely to connect, solely to check in. Never, ever, ever should the first touch with a tech tool be for a grade or even for learning, really. It should simply be to check in. And I should apologize, I talk with my hands. If you guys see, this is a DIY Pinterest disaster this morning with my 2-year-old daughter. We are preschool Critchfield here. And so we had a little disaster with some food coloring this morning. So if you see that on my hands, you know why. But yes, please make sure that that first touch point with the tech tool it just really desperately needs to be just for fun, just for something lighthearted, and not about instruction or assessment. And I have to say this, tech is never neutral. And what I mean by that is that we know that there's an equity gap in education. And I know every single one of you right out there now listening, you're committed to closing that gap. That's why you do what you do. That's why you love your work and why you're so committed to loving, leading, and serving. But do remember, though, that tech isn't neutral, which means that y'all probably want to be thinking of what are tools that we can use in my school that our students will have access to and that aren't going to be responsible for widening the gap, but actually could help to close the gap. And if you have right now, you can mention in the chat box, have you seen these gaps widen, or have you seen these gaps start to close a little bit? In other words, when you've given online instruction, are you seeing students connect more and learn more and be more in tune with what's going on? Or are your teachers reporting that maybe some students are really checking out and maybe they're not able to access the tools? So feel free to pop that in the chat box, because I'd love to kind of hear where you guys are at with that. But truly, tech isn't neutral. So what I would suggest is thinking of tech tools where the only thing students need access to is a device of some kind, and maybe Wi-Fi. And I will share how you don't even have to have Wi-Fi for some of these tools. But that's really all you need to make sure students have. They might not have a desktop, they might not have an iPad, but if someone in the house has a Droid, an iPhone, or some sort of smartphone or smart device, pick that tool. Because all the other fancy tools, while they might be beautiful and while they might be a lot of fun, it is not a neutral tool, and it is a tool that could potentially widen that gap a little bit more than you want. So I will share some of those tools with you guys. And then I would also add, one thing that's important to know is that when it comes to that connection piece, it is extremely time intensive upfront for your teachers, more so than a regular classroom. So I think that's important to note, because a lot of people might not realize that about online instruction. Those first couple weeks of online instruction were probably so challenging for your classroom teachers, so challenging. And that's because that workload and prep to connect is incredibly time intensive, in addition to all the instructing that they were doing as well, right? So what I would just mention along those lines is just to keep that in mind, that your teachers might need a little bit of time and support on the front end. Now, what you should also know is when that online course is running, the workload isn't as intensive as a regular classroom, okay? And I say that I've been doing this since online instruction since like 2007, 2008. And I've just found that it kind of rolls. Once you create a routine and consistency and you've connected with your online learners, things will sort of roll. And once they get used to the tools and the habits with those tools, things will go, right? But up front, building the resources into those tools, reaching out to students through those tools, asking how they're doing, making those connections up front is incredibly time intensive. So if by chance this does go into the fall, please know that your teachers might need more support on the front end than during or after the semester. The front end is where they're really going to need your helping hand as much as possible.
Meredith, a couple of just points in the chat that I want to make sure I know.
Yeah,
To
please.
watch the chat at the same time, but some questions about sort of like that engagement divide, and I know you're going to be talking about tools to engage, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned the equity and the tech divide, that kind of thing, and then just really how, getting teachers to decide on 2 or 4, particularly at the high school level where you have 9 different teachers all sort of doing their own thing. So just to kind of keep that in mind as you go forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say in terms of the kind of high school approach, it goes back to that objectives. There are, I think, consistencies in the sciences, perhaps. For instance, virtual dissection websites. Those are going to be of value. And so what I would suggest is if you are in the secondary or even middle, any kind of departmentalized setting, that those common content area teachers commit to trying a couple tools. You're going to find more success. We all know that teaching is about data, right? And so they're going to be able to get more data to figure out how learners are actually handling these tools. So what I would recommend is finding some common content area tools that meet the specific needs of those content areas, and really going forward with those. A high school shouldn't really be using all the same tools because the needs are so different, from physics to AP Lit to introductory composition to Spanish, right? So really keeping in mind those objectives, I think, will be helpful as well. Yeah, great. Please keep asking those questions. I'm going to keep going, but pop them into the chat box, anything that comes in, and then Carol's going to kind of chime in and give me those questions. So please don't be shy. Ask away. That's what I'm here for. Pick my brain, okay? So one thing that I think is really been challenging for a lot of teachers and students, and I know it's been quite frankly heartbreaking for me, is that loss of social connection. And humans need connection. We crave connection. You guys are probably all feeling that right now from the, isolated homes and spaces that you're in. We crave it. And that is especially true of children. They're naturally social learners. Everything we know about the way the brain develops and the architecture of the brain is that learning happens best when it's social, and that engagement happens when it's social. And so we really have to be thinking about how we can select tools that enhance social connection and find ways not just for teacher to student communication, but student to student communication. That's critical. Okay. I would also say that when we're talking about that equity piece, find tools that humanize. To be frank, there are tools out there that are nothing more than an assessment piece, and that's fine if that's what you're looking for. But for me, I want to build tools into my online classroom, whether I'm working with my preschool daughter, kindergartners, or working with doctoral learners, and everything in between. The ultimate goal should be to humanize and to give a sense of connection, a sense of I think that like love that we're all kind of feeling like we're missing, building it back in through the tools that we choose. So in other words, while I frequently use a tool like Padlet. It's primarily static in that you post a discussion question, students double click, and then they type out a message. I love the tool, but for me, it doesn't humanize and give a face and a voice to students as much as some of the other tools that I'll share. So I would just encourage you to think about what are the tools that are not just there to assess, that's important, but what are the tools that are actually going to give and breathe life into the online classroom? Also, it is entirely possible to create experiences in the online classroom. And although it might not seem possible, I personally know kindergarten teachers right now who create circle times with their students over Zoom. And I mean, just this last Friday, we had music day. My daughter had her xylophone, her music instrument of choice. I had my rainmaker, and her entire class was there. And all of her teachers were logged on, and we were singing songs together with our instruments. And so you can have circle time. It's entirely possible. And then to that point, I made about virtual dissections or engineering tools. There are so many tech tools that support that as well. And so you can create those experiences, having students build something online or do a virtual field trip, for instance. There are lots of ways to create experiences for your students so that it doesn't have to be that static experience that I mentioned earlier. And then I would also add, check your students' social, emotional learning too, and also check in with your teachers. Check how they are doing socially and emotionally as well. And so build in temperature checks and ensuring that your teachers are also doing okay. So asking them questions like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how are you doing today? And you could use a really simple tool like Google Forms for that, where you could just send out a message and say, how is everyone? Or a tool like Remind, how is everyone today? Tell me how you're doing. So there are a lot of different ways to check that. But I think if all we're doing is imparting content knowledge as teachers, we're not doing enough. And so you want to make sure that your teachers and your schools are really checking in on students, because we know that this has been a pretty much traumatic situation for many of our students. They've become accustomed to 8 to 10 hours a day of socialization. They've been accustomed to the routine of their teachers and their classmates and the staff members at the school and your smiling face as the administrator, and now they don't have that. And it has rattled a lot of students' worlds, particularly students who are, on the autism spectrum, students with ADHD, students who are particularly spirited. That change in routine has been nothing short of traumatic for them. And so the more we can get our teachers to be checking in socially, emotionally with students, the better off we will be as well. Okay, do we have some questions coming in? Got a big old list here.
Yeah, it's a little discussion, particularly to secondary students. It sounds like they're, just the whole engagement. So I think just thinking not just elementary, but also secondary. And people are just out there offering some suggestions about
Great
engagement, Flipgrid, classtools.net.
Yes. I love it. Yeah, please keep pouring those into the box. And I think the best thing is just sort of to play around with the tech tool. So hopefully you're jotting a couple of these ideas down, but do know that you just kind of have to fiddle around with them and see what you like, see what you don't like. Another thing that's really helpful for me when I'm first looking at the tools is that I will pull up like the page where they say like the about or the plans that they have, and they'll usually have kind of like a checklist of what the tool offers relative to a paid version of the tool or a different tech tool. And so I would just encourage you to pull up those pages as you're looking at the tech tools so you can see, okay, this allows, synchronous and asynchronous, great. Or, this allows me to collect data on the back end. Oh, great. This allows me to build in checks for understanding. Great. So really just kind of looking at like the checklists of what the tools offer will really help you decide if that's something worth sharing with your teachers or not. Yeah, thank you for that. Okay. So what I would love for y'all to do now, I just sort of poured out some ideas for you, but what questions are popping up for you? What are concerns that you have about your teachers connecting remotely? Maybe it's the engagement piece, maybe it's the equity piece, but what's sort of on your mind? If you would, head into that chat box and just type away anything that's sort of on your heart right now. Hopefully I can hear you guys typing away. So I see a question about how Robin from How to Breathe Life into Secondary Students. I will actually get to that. And I see that Marnie is also offering classtools.net and Craftify and Loom as well. Those are great tools, and I will share a couple that are also really helpful. But what other questions do you guys have? What do you want to know? What sort of like, how does that work? Or could that be possible? Or she's saying this, but what I'm really seeing is this. Or hey, what does that look like for these different sets of learners? Pop those into our chat.
I know that some of our districts have asked that teachers not use like Zoom or things where they're going to be sharing live video, where you'd be seeing the kids on a live video kind of thing. Do you have any suggestions for connecting when you can't really see them? Or anything that you
well,
found
there
really
are
effective?
well, there are some tools that allow you to get permission from parents first. So it actually requires that a parent say, yes, my child can use this. Yes, this has video. Yes, I agree to it. So one of those tools being Flipgrid, for instance. And so I would first look into those tools that sort of have built in the awareness that video is a concern when you're working with children. So I would start with that, looking at the tools that offer that. Flipgrid, like I said, is one of those tools that acknowledges that. Second, there are tools that that can just solely be audio based, and Zoom can be audio based. Flipgrid can be audio based. And if you, as I mentioned, Padlet, although I think Padlet has its, and that's Padlet, I think Padlet has its weaknesses. It is a place where students can upload photos that connect to what they're saying, or photos of something that they've learned or of their work. They can also type out their responses. They can respond to their peers. And so I would definitely suggest a tool like Padlet if you can't have that video feature. But again, if possible, do tap into those tools that enable that parent awareness that video is included. So I would suggest that. Thank you for that. Any other questions? Yes, Alyssa. Hi, Alyssa. Yes, Flipgrid is so amazing for interacting with students. And Alyssa, I believe you're in second grade classroom right now, first or second. And you can use it with first and second grade, and we'll get to all of that. But okay, if other questions pop up, please let me know, guys. So is that Alyssa here? Okay. When I mentioned first and foremost connect to assess, what I wanted you guys to really feel is that this whole online experience is just that. It's an experience. It's a process. We have to not just think of the tools that are going to allow us to give the grades. It's going to be a tool that allows us to give an experience to our students as much as possible. And so really think through how you can connect in order to instruct, in order to assess, and then follow that loop through and through and through, and continue. Connect, instruct, assess. Connect, instruct, assess, and then continue that cycle as much as possible. Let's talk about this assessment piece, because that goes to the engagement component. How do you get students to want to do some online tasks and want to be in your online classroom? So the first thing that I would say is really we have to make sure that our teachers are keeping it simple. The more complicated, the less response we'll see. And I'll give you guys an example just recently for me. I have some amazing colleagues, and they kind of built like 6, 7 different tools into their new online space. And their students felt like they were being like that wheel. Their spokes were going in so many different directions. They didn't know how to handle it. So what I would recommend instead is keep it simple and keep it consistent. And your teachers need to say what the expectations are of the online class over and over and over and over again. And just as we would tell our students to put their name on the top of their paper over and over and over, we sort of forget we have to do that online too. We have to say, you need to make sure you click this button and you will be responding X number of times per week, and you will be on Flipgrid to record 1 video per week. And we have to say that to them over and over and over. So keep it simple, but keep it consistent, and say what it is they need to do so many times, even when your teachers might feel like they're being so repetitive. The more you say it, the more they'll get it. And in the more places you can say it. So let me give you all an example of that. Let's say I'm using Google Classroom. I'm going to give the expectations for that week in Google Classroom. But if I'm having them do a Flipgrid video, I'm also going to say it in Flipgrid. And I'm going to say it in writing in Flipgrid. And I'm going to say it in a video in Flipgrid. And I'm going to say it in another way, right? And so finding as many ways, as many touch points to communicate the expectations will be better off for learners. Also differentiate. We say this so many times in the classroom every single day. Your teachers are differentiating from the moment they walk in the door to the moment they leave. All they're thinking about is, how can I meet this student's needs, this student's needs, this student's needs? And the same thing goes with instructing online. We have to differentiate, and we have to differentiate in ways that might support our learners as best as possible. And so I spoke to the Wi-Fi access issue. There are some tools that, most tools are going to require some sort of Wi-Fi. And if you're in a rural area, access to Wi-Fi might be a major significant concern. And so you have to make sure that you're using a tool that can easily be printed out as a packet and sent. And I think that's important. If the tool can only be engaged in online, something synchronous perhaps, then you need to find a way to do it otherwise. So for me, I recorded some of my instruction through Zoom. I then uploaded it to YouTube. I gave my students the link so that they could be there live to hear me go through the instruction, or they could have the YouTube link to get it as well. And then in addition to that, if they didn't have Wi-Fi, they can't access that YouTube video, I have all the notes prepared and ready for them, ready to go, and I could easily send that to them. Okay, now in my case, everybody had internet access, but what's important to think about is how you make sure there are so many different ways learners are getting access to these tools. So with that said, that could be something like a discussion, right? Having a discussion, but then also maybe having them do a written reflection. Maybe it is where you are simply having them do Q&As. Maybe you give them the opportunity to draw or upload a picture. But our assessment and our instruction really should be unique to our students, and we need to try a lot of different things to get there. Now, I would suggest strongly that the approach you have your teachers take is to grade holistically. And there are so many reasons for this, but equity and access being one of them. It is okay if a student doesn't have something done by May 15th, but maybe they get it done by May 30th. Is their learning any less valid? No, their learning is just as important. Their learning is just as useful. It's just as valid. So what I would just say is it's hard sometimes when we have that mentality. I know I do as a teacher, and you may as a principal have that mentality. Well, it's due this day, it's due this day, it's due this day, right? That's how I got through my school. But when it comes to online learning, it can't always be that way. And we do have to exercise grace, and we do have to think about a more holistic approach because of the unique needs. So there's a website you guys may be familiar with. I use rubrics all the time in every single class I have ever taught since 2004, is a website called RubyStar. It is a website that is federally funded, and it has been for, I want to say, about 20 years. And what it allows you to do is to create a rubric for any grade, any content area in about 5 minutes or less. And all you have to do is click the buttons, and it will create for you a rubric. Now, of course, another nice part of it is that you can go in and change the language. So if you find the language to be a little too easy for your AP Bio students, you can beef that up. If you find the language to be a little too challenging for first graders, then you can dial back the language a little bit. You can change the point totals and all of that. And you can create a rubric literally in 5 minutes or less in RubyStar. And I've been using it again every single year since 2004, and I cannot get enough of it. So I love it. And it has rubrics for every single content area that you can create and edit. So if you are in the sciences, if you are math, or if you are in social studies, if you teach all the subject areas, it's all there. You guys can see on your screen right here, I created this Flipgrid rubric. Flipgrid has its own rubric, which we'll get to in a moment. But yeah, you can see I created this oral presentation. So if I wanted to assess my learners holistically on their Flipgrid response, I created this in about 3 minutes, okay? So very, very quickly, I was just like, boop, 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 boop. There we go, there's my rubric. So that is a really great way. It shouldn't be an all or nothing approach in the online classroom. It really should be helping students achieve their learning goals at whatever time they get to them, in whatever way that they get to them, and looking at it from a more holistic front. Okay, do we have some questions, Carol? You want to shout those out at me?
It was just a funny comment somebody made. That's why I started chuckling, but it said, I told a teacher today that punctuality is a great lesson to teach our students. But this month may not be the month to focus on that.
Exactly. We want to teach punctuality, but in these extreme circumstances, I'm literally like, you're 2 weeks late. That's punctual. Well done.
Yeah.
My understanding of punctual.
And statements about giving kids grace right now and being
Right.
understanding.
I know. Like so many things have just had to shift in our minds as teachers. And I'm sure you guys as principals are really sensing that as well. So many shifts from that instructional perspective are happening. And so I think grace is the name of the game. And that's something that we hold near and dear to our hearts at GCU. But when it comes to learning, it's more about mastery, right? It's not about the win and how much. It's really about them getting more of that content and having more of those abilities and skills than they had before. So that goes to my next point, which is think the long game, not the short game. What I would suggest that you think through with your teachers is, yes, you need to put checkpoints in. For instance, every single week, there needs to be a checkpoint. There needs to be something in which your students are, submitting so that you can formatively glean whether they're getting it or not. But when it comes to the big point stuff, that big summative stuff, we need to be thinking a long-term game for that. And we need to give them ample time. And like I said, grace, because we don't know what all of our students are going through right now or what their access to Wi-Fi looks like. I have a friend's family right now. They've got 4 kids and they all are doing online learning, but there are only a couple devices in the home. So it is a competition to see who can get the device first to get their learning done so that they can be done for the day, right? And we know there's so many situations like that going on. So thinking less about day to day and more week to month. Completion counts. I know that is a shift for a lot of your teachers, where a lot of times we're like, but it's an A, it's a B, it's a C, it's a D. Where'd the E go? It's an F, right? Like we have this very specific mentality that's been ingrained in us, right? Like that is what we have known since we were 5 years old, A, B, C, D, F. But when it comes to an online class, as I mentioned, mastery should be the goal. And so if that's the goal, then think about completion grades. It's not about perfection, it's about progress, my friends. What progress are students making? And making sure that your teachers are looking for the progress, not the perfection, and giving completion points whenever possible. And when it comes to the research with assessment in online settings, feedback has to be far more timely than we might think. There was a rule at a university where I once taught, and enjoyed my experience there for the record, whereas if it took you 4 weeks to write a paper, I had 4 weeks to get it back to you. Friends, that goes against everything we know about online learning. If something takes 4 weeks for a learner, they still need quick and timely feedback from their teachers. And it needs to be specific and what I would call feed forward, meaning the kind of feedback that's going to help them progress forward. So next time, try this. Have you thought about that? I want you to be working on this skill, right? So thinking about feed forward rather than feedback, because in an online setting where it's very mastery completion oriented, everything has to be kind of progressively moving forward as much as possible. Okay, so now I want to hear from you guys. What do you want to know more about when it comes to that assessment piece? So we talked about connecting, engaging, making that real humanizing experience for our students. But what about the assessment piece? Because that's awfully hard to do. And there are a lot of kind of principles that go with that. And we will get into some of the tech tools in just a moment. So come on in with your questions.
Yeah, there was a question from Matthew that it says, any tips on how to speed back assessment and feedback from the teacher perspective? Many teachers are spending countless hours grading, providing feedback in the online world. Mm-hmm. Now, I suggested that potentially grade fewer things. I think you maybe are saying really pick and choose what you're grading.
Absolutely.
Maybe peer-to-peer feedback structures could be something you put into place.
Yes.
But any other thoughts on that?
Absolutely. So I would say definitely peer-to-peer, giving them opportunity to discuss with each other. So for instance, in my class, I had them every week respond to 2 of their peers and using our tech tool that we'll talk about, Flipgrid. So they had to respond to 2 of their peers and give each other feedback on what they were talking about and what they were saying. So it's not just me giving the feedback, it's also the students giving each other the feedback. And that's just a life skill. So whether they're 5 or they're 18, that is a life skill, being able to appropriately give feedback. And what I call it is glows and grows. It's very kitschy, I know, but that's just me. So I definitely recommend thinking through that. So with that said, let me kind of hop into some of your tech tools so you guys can experience that. So Flipgrid, first and foremost, I love it. Flipgrid is tied into Google. And Microsoft owns it as well. They have committed to always having free accounts for educators. So if you do not have an account, if your teachers do not have a Flipgrid account, get one today. It is basically where you can create short video-based discussions on topics. And so to Matthew's point, it's exhausting grading all of those papers. So instead of doing it in that way, have them simulate class-to-class discussions by having peers talk and you talk to them. And it's also much easier to record yourself in 20 seconds on a phone giving feedback than it is to laboriously type out a 2-paragraph message on how they could do better, right? Or what you think of their work. So it is quick, it is easy, and it is fun for students. And all they need is a device and the Flipgrid code you create. So it's as simple as going to flipgrid.com, creating an educator account. Now you will see some terminology in there. There's a grid, it's called the Flip Grid, and that is your class. So you would create a grid for every class. And then from there, you would create topics within those. So maybe it's topic once a week, once every other week, however you sort of have your curriculum set up. So you guys can see a quick screen cap of one of my recent Flipgrids. Our student teachers here at GCU did not get to go through the graduation experience, and so we wanted to simulate as much as we could that special experience for them. So you guys can see here, this is a screen cap of some of our faculty recording Flipgrid videos for our student teachers so that they could at least hear from the dean, Dr. LaPrade there, and some other professors, and all you have to do is just click their little face, their sweet little faces, and you will hear their response there. So you guys can see we had 1,834 views of the videos. So that was only live for 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks, we had 1,800 views. It's pretty incredible. And I want to say 3 weeks in my class, I had students created over 600 videos in a couple weeks in my classes. So it tells you the level of engagement. So if engagement is your concern, Flipgrid's your answer. This is my grid, so you guys can see what it looks like. This is one of my classes and some of the discussion questions that I posed for them. You'll see the connection piece at the bottom. I know it's super small font, but it says, welcome to our online class. I had several students, in this case 21 students, get in there and post videos and just say, here's how I'm doing, this is what's going on in my world. So that before I even had them do any of those discussion questions, be connected. And then I also made it possible for them to ask me questions just as they would in the face-to-face class. They have a live video to say, and I loved it. Students were like, Dr. C, you said this in your YouTube video, but that didn't make sense, tell me more. And so I was able to just video back and, oh, well, this is what a mentor text is, and this is why we use it. So it's a really nice way to connect. And this was just a little video I posted to them. Now, we talked about that feedback piece, right? You can record a video back to them as a teacher, or there's even a rubric built in. So you can give a score for ideas and performance on a Flipgrid video. So you guys were saying, oh my gosh, my teachers are spending hours and hours of time and they've got their life sucked out of them. It doesn't have to be that way. Record a video, tell them how they did, give them a quick score, save. That's it, okay? So some workarounds I do want y'all to know about. If you have students with disabilities in your school, as I'm assuming so many of you do, there is an immersive reader in Flipgrid where it will read the prompts to them. So if they are not able to, you know, for whatever reason, the video is a concern for them, the immersive reader is built in and it reads the prompt out loud. Also, it provides Flipgrid for every single topic you create a QR code. And if you're familiar with QR codes, truly, kindergartners are able to use QR codes. They're really that simple. So all they have to do is hover their phone like this above the QR code, and they're immediately right into the Flipgrid. So they don't have to type in some wild and wacky code to get there. Literally, a QR code can take them there. And I, again, know 5- and 6-year-olds that can use QR codes without any problem. Some of you guys are like fast and furious Googling QR codes, like, hold on here. But they're so simple and easy to use, and Flipgrid automatically creates them. So really any age group can access Flipgrid. It does also offer the opportunity to moderate and approve videos, which I think is pretty important, because if you have some squirrely learners, some learners who say things that are a little risque from time to time, your teachers know that they can go in there and watch and approve before everyone in the class can see those videos. And then permission is required up front from parents. And I mentioned that earlier. That's another beautiful workaround with Flipgrid, is that, you know, you don't have to have students show their faces. For instance, I know several students for whom they have serious anxiety, either they're on the autism spectrum, they don't want to necessarily show their face in a video. Instead, they can show their work. And they just read and walk them through the work. And they said, first in my math problem, I did this, and I did this, and I did this, right? So that's another really nice way to do it. Now, these resources here are just really helpful tools. If you are on EduTwitter, if you are in the world of EduTwitter, I strongly recommend you follow Flipgrid. It is an incredible resource. The CEO is literally tweeting every single day, connecting with classroom teachers and principals like yourselves. It is a really powerful network. And then there's some other ways to kind of get into Flipgrid too. So very quickly before we hop into our kind of last and final tech tool called Pear Deck, what questions do you have about Flipgrid for me? Let me know.
There's been a great conversation going on in the chat while you've been talking. So,
great.
And we do have a video on how to use Flipgrid.
Yes.
So we've provided that for them in the chat as well.
Yes, thank you. Perfect. Okay. So let's talk now about Pear Deck. I love Pear Deck. Now I should say first and foremost, there's a free version, there's a premium version. The difference between the premium version and the free version for me is that the premium version is the one that has the immersive reader. And so with that said, you might want to, you know, think through some workarounds for your visually impaired students when it comes to, well, a lot of these tools, but Pear Deck included, if they don't have an immersive reader built into them. But right now, the immersive reader is only available in Pear Deck. But Pear Deck I love because it is built through Google Slides, and it's a souped up version of Google Slides. So if you can make a Google slideshow, you can use Pear Deck, and I love it. It builds in, it has all these templates with formative assessments already built into them. You can make it synchronous, or you can make it asynchronous, which again, I love, because you guys know that sometimes our learners can't be on the computer when we want them to be. So the synchronous and asynchronous aspects are pretty helpful to that. And everything that students do is automatically recorded into a data file. And you can access that data file after the conclusion of that slideshow, which is pretty darn special, because that way you can start to look at the data and say, okay, they killed it with numbers 1, 2, and 3, but numbers 4, they really struggled on, and that's an area for me. So something for your teachers to know. And it is an extension of Google Slides. All, again, that they need, if you're using the free version, is access to a device and the Pear Deck code. So y'all, I'm trying to keep it simple here, right? We just need Wi-Fi, we need some device, and we need a code. That's it. We don't need any bells and whistles. We don't need fancy podcasting recording devices. We don't need any of that. We just need simple, okay? So what I'm gonna have you guys do now is to navigate to a website so you all can play around with it and try it. So, let me
do that, Meredith. There was just a clarification question. Do you have to have the paid? Do you have to have the paid version for asynchronous use of Pear Deck?
No, it is available for both. Okay, so let me share this with you guys right here. If you would go to joinpd.com. And once you go to joinpd.com, it will give you a 5-letter code. And again, like I said, this is doable for any grade level. My daughter can type in those 5 letters. I am confident that if your students in your schools have access to a device, they can access this. They might need a little parental support, but it is doable, okay? So you guys can see here, all you'll do is type in ALPUY, and at the bottom, I can see how many students are connected. So I can say, okay, if I've got 25 kiddos in my class and I'm only getting 10, that tells me how many people are checked in with me right now. So that's really important to know. So we'll take a few moments here. If you have any questions, pop them in the chat box. Or Carol, if you want to run any questions by me as people kind of get logged in. And we're just going to play around really briefly with Pear Deck so you can kind of see what this whole souped up Google Slides really is all about.
I like how when you type in the code, the join code, that same phrase, that acidic lemons pursue underwhelmed yards, comes up again. So you can kind of verify that you typed it in right.
Yeah.
That was funny. I didn't notice that when I joined it before.
Okay, we'll take just another moment here to get there. Again, I advocate for the free versions, and I know, you know, you guys as a department do, and I hope you all as principals do. There are so many tech tools out there that are free, and we really don't need to be paying for a lot of these because they are supported by big businesses like Google and Microsoft. A lot of these tools are, and so having your teachers pour their precious pennies into these tools and your budgets into these tools, I just don't know if it's a wise use of time. So I'm going to go on and kind of start things here. If you weren't able to access it, you can always see the code is up there in the right. So that's really nice. Okay, so what this enables for you here is I can have you guys now give me a little stress check. I mentioned that socio-emotional learning. So if you would, you just put your finger or your mouse onto the screen and you can kind of drag it over. Uh-oh, somebody's stressed out at a 9. Oh goodness, okay. Now, of course, you always have the jokester student that just like runs it over and forward and back and forward and back and forward and back, but you got to appreciate their sense of humor here. It looks most of us are doing okay. Okay, excellent. So here's another example. What is filling your bucket today and what is draining it? So let's do that. You can type or even draw a picture here. And then as a teacher, I can click show responses. So I can click and see you guys in real time typing this out. I can also lock screens. So if you, again, have a squirrely student in your school and you know you have a teacher with a tough class, they can lock the screens and stop students in their tracks from drawing something inappropriate on the screen. Okay, so take a few moments. Somebody's wife is filling their buckets. Beautiful. Your team, I love that. Had a great faculty meeting. Excellent. Good. Yes, got to teach a PD. Wonderful. Email. Woof, email. Good. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys the options there to have your teachers really do social emotional checks with your students and really see how it's going. So now I would love for you to kind of share an aha moment from today's virtual meeting. What's something that someone has said in the chat box? What's something that maybe I brought to your attention? What's a tool that's kind of percolating for you right now? Again, I love this tool because it can be done synchronously or asynchronously. So I can do this real time and walk them through it, or students can pace themselves and go through it when they're ready. So if you would, I'm going to go and show the responses. If you would, start to kind of message out for us. What was an aha for you? Somebody's looking forward to using Flipgrid. Beautiful. I love Flipgrid. Like, my students are obsessed with it. I can't tell you guys enough. I probably had 15 messages from students saying, thank you so much for using Flipgrid. It made me feel like I was actually in class. Thank you. Flipgrid made all the difference in this online class. So I cannot advocate for Flipgrid enough. Yes, another Flipgridder. I love it. Pear Deck. Wonderful. Yay, that your district is doing a good job. Yeah, the rubrics link, Ruby Star. I don't know what I would have done without it all these years. Yeah, just that simple motto of connect, instruct, assess, right? It's just this, and when I say connect, instruct, assess, it is cyclical, not linear in nature, really making sure we're consistently going through that process. Yay, Flipgrid. Yes, good. Good, yeah, relax on deadlines, good. Yeah, Flipgrid for graduation is great. I'm sorry?
Yeah, the structure of the Flipgrid for graduation, I agree. I was just agreeing with you. That's great.
Yeah. Cool. Yes, progress, not perfection. Amen to that, right? Okay, so with all of that said, and again, I can also make notes. So let's say I'm in this moment, like, okay, I'm taking away that Flipgrid is a hot spot. I can type notes in this and it will save it. I can add a new prompt. If I notice in the moment my students are not getting it, I can click new prompt and it will do that. And now when I end this, it will save the data. So even with the free subscription, it will save my session, as it's called, and I can go back and look at that data at any time, which I just adore. Okay, so let me head back to my slideshow here.
Great, and Jessica shared another tool, something called Goose Chase, a
Ooh,
virtual scavenger hunt. How fun.
fabulous. Oh, I love that. And I mean, guys, there's so many tools out there. Like you can do, like, I mean, there's so many. I mean, my brain's going a million miles a minute because there are so many. If you do have particular questions about particular tools, definitely stay after. I'm happy to help troubleshoot. I just wanted to share a couple quick workarounds. You guys can see there are templates for the littles. So if you heard Pear Deck and you thought to yourself, yeah, that's really great for a 17-year-old, look at some of the templates that are built in. Your teachers do not need to make these. They are built into Pear Deck already. All they have to do is change the letters or whatever, the numbers based on what students are working on. So please know that Pear Deck can work for anyone, and there are a bunch of resources there as well. So again,
a question, is it free? Is the premium version of Pear Deck free during quarantine? Do you know?
They keep extending the 30 more days. And so I believe it is as of now, but they haven't, to my knowledge, made like an official, like, yes, it is. But everyone I know that's using the premium version keeps getting like a free 30 more days. Yeah, good question.